Now I would like to welcome to the stage Dr. Alexander Schmidt. You are Head of Science and Climate Research at Normative, a company that provide emission accounting based on science, which is good. Based on science, not astrology or something like that. Well, tell us a bit about your background. I know you have been an entrepreneur, among other things, in AI and data science. So what made you change to sustainability, and why?
Actually, so thanks first of all for having me here today. Actually, in my PhD, I already did research on sustainability, financial markets, how it drives firm value. So it was not really far away. Personally, I've always been passionate about the topic, and luckily with the Normative, I now found an opportunity to actually combine my academic background with the business entrepreneurial mindset and really trying to ensure our scientific integrity while also bridging the gap between academia, business, policy. So everything comes together that pretty much I've been doing on my entire life. So it's a great combination of roles.
And you still teach at the
university? I do still teach at universities, yes.
Yes, in what topics?
Mostly economics, mathematics, econometrics, so the fun stuff, the ones that really students are always excited about. But I do more and more, of course, also integrate sustainability topics into lectures.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing your presentation. You can take my spot here in the light.
Thank you. All right. So, thanks everyone for having me here today. The topic we want to talk about today is greenwashing and greenwashing, and kind of how to walk the line between the two, or ideally not falling into either of those traps. Now, before I start with my part, I would love to get to know you a bit better. So maybe a quick show of hands. Who of you, or your companies respectively, have set some kind of sustainability targets, internally, externally, some kind of sustainability targets? Who has that? Great. Keep the hands up, keep the hands up. Everyone who has set targets, perfect. Keep the hands up if you have made those targets public. Whose targets are public? Great, very, very good. Who is confident that those targets will not change in the future? Oh, okay, good. Which is good, which I like, because that is just realistic, and that is just where we are right now. At the same time, what this often means that you feel a certain pressure, or you feel kind of caught in this spectrum between, oh, am I doing, too much, quote unquote, towards greenwashing? Like, am I too bold in my claims? Because again, we've seen, you've all are aware the targets might be changing in the future, right? Or am I not bold enough? Am I talking too little about it? So am I falling more on the greenwashing side? So I want to explore this spectrum with you today and hopefully show you a way to break out of it. Like, I'm a huge fan of when there are two options, choose the third one, or create the third one, create your own option. Don't be afraid of there's only A or B, and maybe have to walk this very thin line between the two, especially if neither are very attractive, as in this case. So just to set kind of the scene right here, let's first make sure we talk about the same thing. So when I talk about greenwashing, what I refer to is pretty much this definition here. So it's disinformation. Disinformation that pretty much shows you in a more favorable light than you actually are, or your company's sustainability practices or actions, so to speak, right? So that is commonly what we understand as greenwashing, and we're all pretty much aware that there are risks associated with greenwashing. In recent days, especially, it became more and more apparent that regulators are really cranking down on greenwashing, or on green claims, so to speak. In the UK, you can be fined up to £300,000. In the EU, there are fines up to 4% of your annual turnover. So this could be really significant cost. And if you just look at the recent headlines, airlines being sued, and long and costly lawsuits might be in store for you. Last but not least, your reputation is at line, right? I mean, that is for most companies the most kind of tangible one. When I go out there, I have certain claims, and some groups, some people come around and actually poke holes into those claims. My reputation can be really damaged, and this can have a real impact on my bottom line again. So I think greenwashing, we're all aware that there are real tangible business bottom line risks associated with it. But there's also greenwashing. And actually, yesterday we were just in Copenhagen at another event, and the term greenwashing fell, and I felt like a certain, chuckle going through the audience. It's still quite a new term, and sometimes people are not entirely sure what to make of it. Well, greenwashing in general refers to companies taking deliberate steps not to talk about their sustainability agenda, the goals, their ambitions, etc. And why? Well, maybe because we've seen at the beginning, they have targets, but they are also aware of targets might be changing. So they are a bit afraid to go out there and boldly claiming, I'm going to be net zero by X date, because they know this might change. But it's also important to understand greenwashing can also have serious implications. You might be thinking, oh, I'm playing it safe. I'm doing my targets internally, but I'm not going to be too bold about it. But actually, there are risks as well with this approach. And these risks go beyond your company. You create uncertainties for stakeholders, because if they don't know how you approach your climate-related risks, they don't know their own exposure to those risks, right? We're also going to create a general lack of insights and data. Again, if you as a company, and I don't mean to accuse any one of you, I just take this as an example here. If a company does not share the data, does not share what they have on their roadmap, we're lacking crucial information in the market to learn from. Your buyers don't learn from your emissions data, for example. And this, of course, also leads to missed opportunities in terms of peer-to-peer learning. We hear this again and again from our clients, from our customers. They want to learn from each other. But how can you learn if you don't share, well, also failures, also adjustments to your targets? So greenwashing, not talking about what great stuff you are doing or aiming for, can also have real negative implications. Now, why do you find yourself often in these situations? I just pointed out a few of the most common kind of causes for either greenwashing or greenwashing. Very, very common one is just you go out there with bold claims, but actually you don't have the data behind it. We've seen this especially in some airline industries. This certain fuel is way more climate friendly than another one, but actually scientists then come out and say, well, it's not really the case here. You can also be, of course, overwhelmed by a patchwork of legislation. We just had a chat about this before. There is real, especially if you're operating multiple markets, it is really difficult right now to wrap your head around to know what is the relevant legislation for me right now. I would also be curious to know who knows the difference in this room between climate neutral and net zero, for example. Like, who is confident to give a clear definition of it here? Exactly. I see hesitancy. I mean, again, that is the point. And it's not at all, it's no one's fault there. But we just throw around these terms almost interchangeably, but there are crucial differences. So again, your department might go out and say, yep, we have a climate neutral goal. And everyone would say, hey, hooray, great. And then I come around and say, well, climate neutral is a bit critical, because actually you can use a lot of, sorry, but cheap offsets to claim climate neutrality, while this is not allowed in a strict net zero framework. So actually net zero would be a bit of a harder condition than climate neutral, right? So important to understand these terms, but maybe you don't even know. So unintentionally you might go out and say, again, with the best of intentions, we're going to be climate neutral. Great. But then someone comes around and if they really want to harm your reputation says, well, this is actually not what you should do according to science. So risks you might not even be aware of drives you to either greenwashing or greenwashing. Some other targets, some other reasons, of course, uncertainty about how realistic are my goals, will they change or not? We just saw it here in the audience, and especially the transparency for your value chain underlying data. That's often a big reason for either not talking about it, what you do, or to just not be sure where to go. So, what I want to say here, pretty much, or if you want to boil it down, I'm pretty sure each of those reasons, the drivers for greenwashing or greenhushing, boil down to either a lack of data or a lack of knowledge, of understanding. I mean, test me here, name any kind of reason for greenwashing, greenhushing that cannot be boiled down to data or knowledge or lack thereof. So, if we agree on this kind of as the foundation for why we are often caught in this spectrum between, oh, I'm either greenwashing or I'm greenhushing, how can I walk the line? Here's how I would suggest that you approach this topic, and give you a bit of a framework of how to think about and hopefully solve this conundrum for you and break out of this. First is set a very, very strong foundation of data. I mean, again, you mentioned it at the beginning, that's where I come from, of course. Data is really knowledge because you have the information and then you can build upon this. So data is not judgmental at all, it is just the data. But get the data right, especially the carbon data, the emissions data foundation across your entire value chain, then you have something to start from. On this, you can set targets. When I know where I stand right now, my emissions, my hotspots, my biggest pain points, there is no shame in having a high footprint right now. This is just reality. You have to be open, transparent about it. But then, when you know where you stand, and don't try to close your eyes off, then you can actually set targets based on science. That's super important. Again, this thing about climate neutral versus net zero. Neither are bad, but you have to know what is aligned with the latest science, what not. Be transparent about the information that you then share. Or transparently share all the information ideally, because you want, as you saw at the beginning, if you set a target, you want to be transparent about what assumption underlie the targets. Again, coming from academia, there's a famous quote saying, if the data change, then I change also my opinion or my view on things, and that's exactly what you are entitled to do. If something changes in underlying assumptions or reality, you have to adjust. If suddenly researchers say, well, some ocean warming is actually more pronounced and rapidly advancing than we thought, then we all need to adjust our targets, right? So be transparent in what you're actually doing there. And then you can actually put specific claims on top of this. Then you can go out and, as you all did, confidently not just set targets, but also proclaim those targets publicly. Because if we then go in the reverse order, we have specific claims out there in the open, and someone says, oh, but I don't think, well, then you can go back and say, hey, here's all the information. If there's anything wrong with my assumptions, they have always been public, so let us talk about this. If there's any error in my assumptions, let's discuss and I can revise, or we can revise and we can do better. But this information is backed by targets based on science, which relies on my solid data foundation. So you can play this through top to bottom again and find, hey, actually it all adds up, right? So this framework is one that we kind of teach with or practice with our clients to make sure we help them not to fall into either trap, greenwashing or greenhushing, because we've seen both ultimately can be harmful for your whole business. So I want to leave you not just with this framework, but also with the encouraging note, go out there and do talk about what great stuff you have on your agenda, on your roadmap, as long, of course, as it's based on this pyramid scheme, this, in a very positive sense, a pyramid scheme. Because there's a market out there for sustainability. Investors are willing to pay a premium here. You have a workforce that really, really is attracted to sustainable companies, and your own employees, in terms of retaining talent, they want you to talk about it. I mean, you look at me, you just ask me, how did I find my way into sustainability or into normative? Just because of those reasons, because normative is a great employer for those reasons. That's why we get so many great people in our company. So you do want to be vocal about your sustainability agenda, as long as you can be confident in what you're actually doing here. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and thank you so much.